Hey now, you're hanging out with your brother Marcus. That's right, with another episode of the Elements of Inspiration Brother Marcus podcast. Well, today I want to talk about don't nobody bring me no bad news. Now, some of us, we've always heard the term of, how do you handle negative news or bad news, and how do we get through that? I remember watching The Wiz. Some of you might know The Wiz, right? Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and so many other great actors and actresses was in this adaptation of The Wiz. But there was a point in the show where there was a part where the lady would sing and say, "Don't nobody bring me no bad news." And most of us feel the same way. We don't want a lot of bad news. We don't want a lot of negativity, right? So, how do we deal with bad news? Well, there's a couple of things that I want to share with you. Dealing with bad news, it always involves managing what? Our emotions. We definitely need to understand how to manage our emotions, and we have to take the opportunity and the time to limit exposure and talking positive. We need to be talking positive when we're exposed to these negative things, right? And we need to focus on what we can control, practice self-care, and also seek support from trusted friends and family. That kind of sums it up for me. But I want to kind of go into a little bit of, a little depth, all right? So when we're thinking about dealing with negative stuff, somebody calls you and says, "Oh, I got to tell you what so-and-so said, and this is what's happening," and people are feeding you negative things. And we're seeing images on the television where we're seeing, things are happening in different parts of the world, or even in our own city where young people's lives are being taken. And how do we manage in dealing with these things that are coming into our vision and in what we hear and what we experience? And we might experience some negative things. So we need to figure out, how do we manage the negativity, right? How do we deal with bad news? Well, one of the things is we got to learn how to manage our emotions by acknowledging how we feel, right? It's okay to say that I'm upset, or I'm afraid, or I'm scared, or I'm angry that I'm receiving this bad news, because those are like triggers. I believe that it's some sort of a trigger. And so we have to recognize and accept these emotions as they are. I believe that God has given us feelings and emotions that we can feel certain types of way, and we can, we go through these ups and these downs and these changes, but we realize that we're human. And those are the parts of us being human. We're all human. We're going to feel, we're going to, have anxiety, we're going to be stressed out, but we have to learn how to acknowledge what it is that we're dealing with, so that we can fix the issue, we can fix the problem. So managing our emotions is acknowledging our feelings. The other thing is, we all have to learn how to practice breathing techniques, right? It's important that we learn to regulate our breathing, to calm us down. Like, somebody tells you something that, you ever see somebody hear some bad news and they start having heart palpitations and they're breathing controllably, right? And so we want to be able to be in control or be controlled. So we want to control how we feel, with our breathing practices. So that's one of the things that I believe that we need to regulate our breathing. And the other thing is express our feelings. We need to talk to people about what we're feeling, about what we've heard and what we're experiencing. We have to be able to know that this is part of the process of getting better and doing better. And a lot of folks always say, "Man, you're always talking about therapy." Yeah, always. Because I believe that no one should turn away from therapy or therapists or, those who are life coaches. We need to be able to express ourselves with those type of people and share what we're thinking and what we're feeling, so that they can navigate us to learn how to limit unnecessary exposure to a lot of the things that we see in the media. Some of the things that we see on social media, we have to realize that we might have to be at a point where we have to unfollow some folks and mute notifications. Yeah, really, because your mind, my mother used to say, if your mind ain't right, your body can't function. So we need our minds and our hearts and our bodies to function in a way that's going to be conducive for us, so that we can remain successful and still stay in the game. We need to stay in the game of life. The only way that we're going to do that is to understand how to deal with, bad news. All of us are going to deal with bad news at some point in our lives. But all because there's bad news, it doesn't mean that everything is over and it is the end. That is not so. So we want to focus on what we can control, right? We can continue to take positive actions, by realigning ourselves, resetting our minds, empowering ourselves, taking a break from, a sense of powerlessness that most of us might feel along this journey. And we also need to make a list of things that we can change. Identify those areas, all of us. Let's identify those areas where we can, make some changes in our lives. So how we receive information, right? How we take in information, and allow us to focus on, the present moment, right here, right now. Let's be present. And in that, we can pray. In that, we can trust someone that is greater than ourselves to navigate our lives and pull us through. And the other thing that I would say when we're dealing with negative news and information is the way that we handle it is we got to self-care. We got to deal with self-care. We have to put a practice of self-care in place, prioritize our sleeping. You got to get some sleep. I got to get some sleep. We need to be sleeping so that we can process our emotions and thought processes clearly. The other thing is we know we got to eat right. Some of us, we're eating all kinds of things that trigger us. Now, we need to find out what are the good things that will keep us calm. What foods? I believe that there are some foods that we can eat and consume that will keep us, mentally regulated with a even keeled mindset instead of always being on a 10 or hearing negative news and we're just, tripping out. Now, I remember when we were living in New York City. Well, I was living in New York City, of course, and 9/11 had happened, and I'll never forget that day. I won't go into detail, but I'll say this. I was working on 34th Street and walking, in Manhattan. When everything went down, they got us out of the building. We evacuated the building. And I wasn't afraid. I wasn't scared. I don't know why I was so cool, calm, and collective, but I was kind of like, all right, we just got to get up out of here. And I wasn't running back upstairs in the building. I was very calm. Why? I believe it's because of, how I'm wired. Now, I'm not saying that I don't get upset and I don't get angry and I don't get mad, but it just seemed like in that moment in time, I was cooler than I've ever been. I was so relaxed. My heart went out to all of the people that have gone through the tragic, issues of the day. But I was calm during the process of it all. Being in Manhattan, seeing hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, cars couldn't move. And it was one of the most devastating, situations that I've experienced in my entire life in America on this planet. But I realized because, each and every one of us, we handle things differently. I was always a person of prayer. I always prayed. And I believe that continuously praying is what kept my mind stayed on God. And, and the way that we need to continue to keep our mind stayed on God is when we're seeking God's support, of course, not only for us, but family and friends and people and situations and circumstances. And we have to continue to keep the faith no matter what happens. It doesn't mean that we can't accept what's happening, but we have to pray for the happenings that do occur and ask God to pull us through. So how do you deal with negative news? How do you deal? Everybody deals with things differently. These things we know. But, in old Brother Marcus fashion, I got to give you some biblical scriptures to kind of help us to pull us through. Because what I've learned is that the Bible doesn't just suggest, but also tells us how to deal with bad news by trusting God and finding strength in his purposes and remembering that trials are temporary. There's a song that goes, trouble don't what? Last always. And just like the clouds that are in the sky, we love sunny days, right? We love that. But there also comes a time when the clouds come in and the rains come. And when that does happen, we have to kind of, some people are fair weather people, but trouble don't last always. Rain and clouds don't last always. They will go away. And we need to also remember God's promises in the book of Psalms, chapter 112, verse 7. It states, we will not fear bad news. His heart is firm, trusting in the Lord. These verses emphasize finding steadfastness and security in faith. When we have faith in God, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, we're going to be okay. And so I wanted to share that with you really quickly, that we have to remember God is always in control. And we need to remember God's promises, right? God has given us promises that he will never leave us and he will never forsake us, no matter what comes our way. And we need to find strength, even in the suffering. When you hear bad news and it's not in your favor, even in that moment of frustration and anger and mixed emotions, we still have to remember that there is strength in the suffering. Everything happens for testimonial reasons. If God is bringing you to it, he will bring you through it, because only God can do it. And we need to remember that we got to seek God for comfort, even in the most questionable situations in all the world. And so that is the Element of Inspiration Brother Marcus podcast for today, as we talk about how do you and I deal with bad news. Well, continue to trust God. Make it a great day, everybody. Now remember, as I say on the radio, don't touch that dial. But in this case, don't touch that podcast. More Element of Inspiration, quicker picker-uppers coming up. Yeah, coming up on the Element of Inspiration Brother Marcus podcast. Stay close.